First question, everyone good? Good. I'm glad you're all relaxed. Probably start with an introduction. Obviously, you got a slight overview. I'm going to respect rank, and I'm going to allow Trevor to introduce himself first.
All right. Trevor Robinson. Apparently, I have to describe myself for people that might not be able to see this. So I'm around 6 foot, black, dreadlocks, wearing a white shirt, tie and a waistcoat. Very smart for me, but I thought I'll dress up. My mum might be in the audience. Over to you, sir. Oh, I'm creative director of Quiet Storm, advertising agency. It's a production company as well, so we write and direct a lot of our own work. I also run, started off a project called Create Not Hate, where I get kids from my background, try and get them into advertising. Very similar to what Jeremy's doing here, actually. So, yeah, that's me, I think.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for taking the hit for me. Hi, everyone. My name is Dane Baptise. I'm a comedian, podcaster, occasional actor and producer. For anyone who may be audibly impaired, I would say personally, I look like if Usher and Dave Chappelle had a baby. 6'1". What you're hearing is my southern drawl. Grew up in southeast London. I've also been asked to tell you about my journey, because I want to make sure that this is a fruitful exercise for everyone here. So I started off as a media sales executive and always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. My first ever gig was in 2006, and then I began doing comedy in earnest about 2010. So I've been doing comedy about 13 years, pandemic included. And yeah, I did my first Edinburgh show in 2014. I'm the first Black Briton to be nominated for an Edinburgh Award. I wrote my first sitcom for BBC Three, 2016. I'm also the first Black Briton to write a sitcom for the BBC in 25 years. And yeah, and I do other stuff. Thank you very much. But what I definitely hope to come across here for everyone that's attending is just to make everyone feel very relaxed. Feel free to ask questions at the end of this chat. And most of all, I think I just want to make very clear that I never had any real belief initially that I'd be able to transition from my career in media sales to becoming a professional creative. And I think that's why I'm very humbled and flattered that Jeremy invited me to be here at the festival so that I could relay that journey to you and also let you know that anyone can make that transition. So that is why we are both here, because I believe, and I'm sure Trevor can verify as well, self-doubt and anxiety are a natural part of every creative's complex. We kind of move between, pendulum swing between delusions of grandeur, of how we'll be the masters of our respective crafts, and then there's other times when I'm like, why do I shower at all and leave my house? And if you have experienced any of these crests and troughs at any point in your life or careers, then congratulations, you care about what you're doing. So the purpose of today is for us to just discuss how we can maintain that trust when you deal with adversity. So everybody relax, and yep, the floor will be open for questions at the end, if everyone's happy. And yeah, we'll proceed. And thank you to everybody that will be watching online too. Trevor, you good to go?
Yeah, I'm sitting here.
Cool.
Ready.
So yeah. So the first thing we want to discuss is basically about creative courage, particularly in advertising, as well as in comedy. And the question kind of is, which I'll direct towards you, Trevor. And the question is, do you think we are losing a little bit of our creative courage in advertising today? The courage to intelligently use creativity to consider and reflect on some of the more challenging issues in society, to tell deeper advertising stories and solicit real consumer emotion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have to go back a little bit, because I've been in advertising for a long time now. I've been running my own agency almost 30 years, and before then I was at an advertising agency called Howell Henry Chodicott Lurie, where with me and my previous creative partner, Al Young, we did a tango slap, and then we did a lot of the pot noodle stuff. It was a key thing for me to be involved with because it kind of rippled outside of advertising. People in the world knew about it, and not just the industry. And that actually helped me not get fired again, because we got famous because of that. And it also allowed me to start my own company up. I come from, originally grew up in Clapham, didn't really know anybody of my color in the advertising industry. Actually, one guy, and he promptly went off to the States. But there wasn't, you sit up at award dues like this, and you wouldn't see another black face in the room. So it was quite an intimidating environment to come in. And somebody was talking about it the other day, imposter syndrome. I didn't really know what that was, but I felt that for a lot of time when I was in advertising, because I used to think at any stage now, the door's going to come kicking off and they're going to say, you're black, you shouldn't be here, get out. And that was a serious headset that I had to get over, and realize that I always knew I had the ability to do the work, but I just didn't feel I had the ability to be in an environment around Oxford grads and a sea of white faces that spoke properly and looked the part and sounded the part. So it took me a few years to get my sort of headset right for that. But when it comes back to your question, when we were working on things like Tango, you had a client that basically walked in a room and said, I want to be famous. I want the ads to be famous. I want us, little brand, Tango, Brickvit, we want to scare Coca-Cola. We want Coca-Cola to kind of go, who the hell are these guys? And we want to create something that feels inherently British, that felt like, no other country, no other product could do that. So it was a really great brief for us, because all we had to do was impress this client and scare him a bit. And we did do that. But I do feel nowadays, with everybody using data, everybody thinks they can do our job just as well. They feel that they know what a good idea is and they can make a good idea. And I think that blurring the lines has affected the quality of the work that is being produced out there. I think the work is being tainted a lot by people putting their oar in terms of the creative process. And sometimes people are so frightened to do something that won't work out there. Compromises and research and all these things dilutes the integrity of the idea. I'm not saying all the time, but I do think that is where the bravery thing is seeming to, going from clients that went, scare me, to now, do not do anything scary.
Cool. I think, I guess I can try and speak from it from a creative standpoint as well, in my case, where I spent a lot of time in comedy. I think with most people that work in creativity, people see like having representation as part of your validation. And by representation, I more mean having an agent or having an intermediary that's able to negotiate on my behalf. And I should definitely begin with a story where I was told that by a lot of agents that they already had black British acts and they didn't really see any nuance in what I was doing. And so didn't really feel the need to sign me. And it kind of was disheartening, but I think in this particular context, having the courage in my own ideas and also having, the precedent, and I guess I'd had the benefit of seeing people like Trevor and people like Mr. C, who basically got me involved in this festival to renew my resolve in my ideas. And I got into a conversation with a producer, former junior producer, who was working in TV and working on stuff like Sunday Brunch, the show. So, but somebody who also ran comedy nights, who was also trying to get me signed. And I'd floated the idea to them of just managing me themselves, because I had enough, courage in my ideas that I just needed somebody to show me the correct avenues in order to kind of purport those said ideas. So it's basically me, her husband, and I became a small kind of mom and pop outfit as a comedy agency. before I went to Edinburgh, and based on the outcome, I said being the first Black British nominee, that company has grown significantly and has now, signed comedy acts, which I imagine that you'll be familiar with, like Mo Gilligan, who has the latest show, Babatunde Eleshi, who was recently on I'm a Celebrity, are now both signees to this agency, which kind of grew out of necessity because, in a very similar experience to Trevor, comedy is also largely represented by drama and theatre school graduates and people from, I guess, much more privileged socioeconomic backgrounds. But it was definitely about having that courage to, do stuff that scares yourself as well and pushes you in terms of, like, with one of the practices in improv is that when you do have an idea, your fellow players will be like, yes, and. So I think that's always a good point to, when you do have an idea or you do receive knockbacks, using those objections to push your creativity further and obviously, I guess, subvert people's ideas. The other thing I would suggest is sometimes you make it sound like it was their idea too, and then they normally allow you to proceed. So thank you very much for that as well, Trevor. The next point we would like to discuss is that trusting our instincts when it comes to creativity, because trusting these instincts is crucial, especially when it comes to a creative approach, we believe. So I wanted to ask you as well, Trevor, what are the processes that you tend to employ when it comes to developing and testing your concepts and ideas for campaigns?
Well, I've got to say hats off to you, because I think what you do is so brave, and your way of culling or nurturing your ideas and escalating your ideas comes in front of an audience, which, my God, even just sitting here, I find it intimidating, much less doing that for a living. And we're lucky because we have, you start off with coming up with an idea that instantly you're working with somebody else. You can sort of like see, is it answering the brief? Is it making someone laugh? Is it emotionally stimulating us? Are we excited about this? Do we want to share it to someone else? Then we work with, and I work with my wife down there, Rania, and she comes in. We bring her in with the strategists and the planners, account handlers, and then we share the ideas with those guys. And that's another way of gauging if the idea is strong or not. And a few times, just saying it out loud to someone, as you know, saying it out loud to someone in the room, you can realize actually that's a bit of a smelly idea, or that could, they looked a little bit worried when we said that idea. So I think that is another gauge to, and another way of nurturing an idea and feeling comfortable with an idea. And Rania's a really good test of an idea. She's very brutal. And sometimes you do feel like your little babies of an idea is being booted into touch straight away. But at times, you always come out with powerful work, and you always know by the time you show it to the clients, we've interrogated it a lot. We know it works. There's no holes in that particular boat of an idea. So we're really lucky, and then you got research, and you got all the other stuff that you can fall back on. So for us, it's before it ends up on TV or a poster or some piece of communication out in the world, it's been screened a lot. But going back to my first discussion about bravery, sometimes that's where the idea can get destroyed and falls down, because not everybody can recognize a great idea. Not everybody can at the time. I know I've been in situations before. I'm a creative director, but there's been times when people's come in and shared ideas to me, and I didn't get it. I didn't feel it. Like the famous Blackcurrant Tango. I'm not sure if you guys ever remember it. The guys walking up to cliffs of Dover. That when a creative team came into my office with my creative partner, was talking about that idea, and my creative partner Al was going, brilliant, yeah, it's going to be amazing. They left the room, and I looked at Al and went, that's shit. Sorry, that's not a very good idea. And Al goes, no, it's brilliant. And it wasn't until I saw it on telly and they made it, I went, oh my God, that's an awesome idea. Yeah. So it was always a lesson to me to always be. It's a talent in itself to also recognize ideas. Yes. And it's also to nurture them and to make sure that idea gets bigger, stronger, and escalates and doesn't die. And it's a real talent you have to do even when you're working with your creative partner. Your first instinct almost is to go, if it's new, is to go, ooh, I'm not sure if that works, because it's your instinct to be a bit nervous about creative ideas, new ideas. How about you?
Myself, so with comedy, I think on an individual basis, I was taught a process. So I studied a comedy course because it's a great way of procrastinating, but I also wanted to learn some stagecraft as well, because I think with comedy, and if you've ever been interested in stand-up comedy or how it works, a lot of the questions that you're asked about it, like, what do you do about hecklers, or what do you do if somebody doesn't laugh? Most of the answers come from experience. You'll never really know until you get on stage. And it sounds like the hardest part of the whole experience, but I guess in my case, not knowing and having that anticipatory fear was much worse than getting on stage. You know, people use terminology like, it's like being thrown from a horse, and really the courage comes from being able to get back on that horse and kind of doing it again. But not to digress too much, for me, and one of the kind of techniques I was taught was about banking and bidding material. So if something doesn't work, there's probably a lot of indicators that you'll know when something doesn't work, whether it's the response from audience members, or if you are involved in a collaborative process with other like-minded people, and they might be like, I don't really get it. So that idea may not necessarily work. But then normally the art form of telling jokes has a structure where it will have what's called a premise, a setup, and a punchline. So the premise is kind of like an idea, and your setup is like the question of asking who, what, where, how, and why, and then obviously the punchline is kind of the joke. So you may have a premise, and then people may not get that, so it might need more refinement in order for it to progress into the other parts of making a joke. But the process of banking, I guess is using a metaphor whereby you may have an idea that instinctively you understand, you think it's very funny, but people you may work with or audience members may not get it right away. So the idea of banking is just like you do with your money. You will hold something there and continue to invest in it and see it grow until that investment becomes mature enough to be profitable for you. So I guess the most real life example I can give is that I remember a lot of my friends from uni got married around the same time, and for some weird reason I ended up going to 5 different strip clubs in London at the same time. Judge me how you choose, but I wouldn't stigmatize sex workers. Another conversation for another festival. Anyway, I was trying to write about those experiences, and I found it quite difficult, not because I don't think it was necessarily being derogatory, but it was trying to find the parallels between that experience and experiences that people can relate to, or how people can relate on a larger scale. And that probably took me about 3 or 4 years to get some material that I was happy with, even if it only lasts for about 3 minutes. But I tell you that because instinctively I knew it would work once I kind of honed the material down and was able to get rid of the extra fluff here and there. And there may have been a lot of people that were kind of cynical about what I was doing, but it was about trusting in myself in the process and having those instincts of being once I get this down, I know it will work. But that can also be kind of a long and exhaustive process where you're able to kind of maybe speak to more experienced comedians and also kind of gauged by the audience. So I guess for me, there have been kind of instances where I may not have seen the light at the end of the tunnel right away, or I've also had ideas where someone might have presented an idea I didn't understand right away. But as yourself, Trevor, comedy is quite a nuanced art form, is that sometimes you have to see the execution of something to see why it works. Because I'm very sure there's a lot of stuff I might write down. If you were to just read it, you'd be like, why does he think this way? Someone should help this man. But then when it's done on stage, then it makes a lot more sense, which I hope that did to you guys as well. So, the next point I want to discuss, and I hope, guys, all good so far? Cool. Remember, we're not at a lecture, so enjoy yourselves and relax. No one is judging you on how much you pay attention. But yeah, I hope you guys have got some questions. We'll be happy to answer. So the other point is, in whatever creative sector you're in, building a rapport and trust with the intended audiences is critical to them understanding the context that sits behind the creativity. What do you think the advertising, marketing, and design communities could learn from the way other industries approach this?
It's a difficult question, this one, for me, because, like I said, I've been in the advertising industry for a long time, and I've been running my own business. And so you're in a bit of a bubble. Like, you don't... I know about our weaknesses and our strengths, and I know Rania does a lot more of meeting other businesses. She heads up Wackle, so she's around a lot of talented women and very bright women that have been running their businesses for years and years, and so she's able to glean a lot of information from all these different places. I'm running an advertising creative department, not advertising, I wouldn't even know how to start there, but I've been running my own creative departments, working with other creatives, looking at all the other sources of creativity out in the world, looking at talented people like yourself, and then using that like a sponge and drawing that back into my own work. So I'm not sure if I'm qualified to talk about what other business should be giving us or what we should be translating to them. I do know in the advertising industry years ago, you could see it in film and promos, it was influenced by advertising, and you could see the work. But I think now technology and the talent that's out in the world, it's the other way around now. I think we're like stealing ideas from AI and from movies and from TV. TV's jumped completely in terms of a form of entertainment as well. But
it's cool. I think I definitely agree with those points as well. I think I had the benefit of working within comedy. Rapport building is a natural part of what you're doing anyway. You kind of have to make sure that your audience is comfortable first before you even proceed to kind of tell people jokes. And also understanding the energy that you are observing within the audience definitely helps you to understand how you're going to kind of perform. I think that's been one of the great things about comedy, is that the opportunity to rapport build is probably one of the best ones I've ever gotten, where I'm able to not only have the experience of sharing my time on the stage with other minority groups and people from various different backgrounds, irrespective of ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender identity, but I can also hear a direct account of their experience and also hear the nuance between those different experiences. And that is just so important, just so that when I have my chance, or I make observations, or I talk about a premise, I can do so in a way whereby I can actively check in with people and be like, does it make sense what I'm saying? And they'll say yes or no, or they might make kind of like recommendations. I think that my own personal belief is that any industry that involves interaction or involves marketing or catering to humanity, which is most of them, I think rapport building is kind of essential. I think that's probably been a process that has become a lot more streamlined due to social media. So now a lot of corporate entities have the benefit of seeing focus groups constantly acting. And there's probably people that can kind of test that, where you see a lot of campaigns that might be brought out and they might be somewhat problematic, and they can instantly get feedback from people's reactions on social media, which allows them to adjust that in real time. But I think you can definitely preemptively rapport build and have customers and other stakeholders be involved in the creative process just by putting out ideas. But I think it's very important for it to continue to remain inclusive and for you to have successful campaigns on both sides, whether it is creatively or in the form of marketing and advertising. That being said, moving on, we are currently, this is a statement written anonymously, but we are currently experiencing a number of culturally defining moments in society, and considerable nuance is needed to ensure creativity and creative output is both edgy, but also considers the delicate balance. How do you navigate this nuance in the ideas and advertising you produce?
Well, it's fairly easy, that bit, because it's fun. It's fun looking at new ideas that's come through. It's something that keeps me feeling rejuvenated when all these new influences are coming in, and then you do look to try, how can we bring that into our work? How can we generate that excitement of the new into what we do. So for me, it's something that I embrace and something that I know the teams, we're always sharing new things that people have seen out there in the world. I just got an ad just sent to me recently, just as I was waiting here, the new Tesco's ad, and it's just a beautiful, heartfelt little commercial. I recommend you look at it. And so we're forever sharing ideas and sharing, you must look at this, you must look at that. So I find that easy to try to bring that into the work.
Just to add on to the question of that as well, in your personal experience, have you seen a significant change in briefs in terms of who they are trying to reach or the methods by which they're using to engage with audiences?
What for clients?
Yeah.
Not really. I think what's fun about what we do, I don't just have one client. I have all, and they all come with different problems, and they all come with having you to think slightly differently about how to solve that problem. And we use data. Yes, we use insights into the target audience that we're talking to. But it's something that it's something that problem is the fun part of what we do, I think, because every client comes in, you're never going to be bored because you'll always have something, a different problem to deal with and a different solution to come out of that. And I always find it really interesting when you're looking at a target audience and they're all housewives, and so you have to sell that way in terms of how they are with their kids, but also those people like to go out with their friends, and they're completely different personality from when they are at home with the kids to when they're going out. So your idea has to be that flexible, and your thinking has to be that agile in order to be able to get this person who's now sat on the sofa with their family and entertain them enough that they're going to want to buy into whatever product that you're trying to sell them.
Cool. I just want to check in with everybody here real quick. Have most of you observed like what you can perceive as like cultural changes in like advertising, maybe the last couple of years? Cool. Well, we'll discuss that very later, guys. We'll come back to that. But thank you for engaging. Very much appreciated. So to make sure you're still here and obviously understand that it's important to build a rapport with you guys as well. So hold fast, guys. Very much appreciated. We have one more question, and then I'd love to hear from you guys. So if you have any questions about your journey. And also, just by show of hands, is anyone currently working in advertising or marketing, creative industry right now? Right, the whole gang. Cool. And those of you who may not be working in there, you're equally welcome, and we welcome your questions as well. I want to make sure that's very clear. We have one more question, and then we'd like to open the floor for some Q&A if everyone's happy. Cool, and thank you very much, Trevor. So far, so amazing. All right. So it's more of a direct question for Trevor and I, which we'll hope to answer. And it's, where do you find your creative inspiration, and how do you translate and curate this inspiration into the genesis of the ideas that form your ideas and campaigns? Is it a natural process for you? Or if not so, what other techniques do you employ to ensure you capture the inspiration in the moment that it comes? I do, like, it's a running gag at my office is like they should get me tagged, because I tend to get up and go for walks and just go off places, because I think for me, I like to go to exhibitions, I like to just be stimulated by the world a lot. Also now you've got this computer in front of you where you can just go off onto this journey of discovery. And I find, I'm sure you guys are the same, when you go online now, you feel like, oh God, where did the time go? I just spent like an hour looking at Instagram memes and nonsense. So I tend to use the stimulus of the world a lot in terms of just going out and some of my thoughts come that way. But mostly it's sat opposite with someone. I'm definitely, hats off to you. You come up with ideas yourself, and it's all. I definitely come up with stuff when I'm talking to someone. Yeah.
And I think that conversation, sometimes you say things that that should never leave the room. It's so wrong. But at the same time, you're pushing yourselves. You're trying to entertain each other. You're trying to make each other laugh. You're trying to make each other, think. And I think that's the best source of creative ideas for me, is when I bounce off somebody else. And hats off to people who can just write in their own little vacuum and come up with creative things. Because my brain just does. I think I'd be too bored by myself.
Yeah, no, I'm very similar. It's, you can come up with very good ideas in isolation in comedy, but if you say them to yourself and laugh, you may be dealing with other issues other than coming up with material. Not that that's any problem if you are neurodivergent and that is a trait of that, that's fine too. It's whatever process works for you. But I think I definitely agree with you, Trevor, in that comedy, in order for it to be efficient, is a collaborative process. And again, part of my teaching was trying to emulate a conversation. And that means that there will be changes, like with any campaign, in pitch and pace and tone, where there's a very different energy I will use dealing with you lovely people in this room, which will be very different to doing something like Live at the Apollo, where you have to project a lot more and use a very different energy to communicate your ideas. For me, I definitely get my inspiration from a number of different sources, which people ask you all the time, so hopefully this will save that question, because people always go, where'd you get your material from? What'd you come up with? Is it real life? Do you make it up? And the answer is yes. So all of those, because I'm having the same experience as every other person is as well. There's not necessarily a process whereby something happens to me and then I write it down and then I make it funny, which again, people tend to think is the disposition of the comedian. Like you'll be like, call your insurance company, be like, I crashed my car into a lamppost. And they'll be like, you'll probably get some material out of this. And I'll be like, that's not why I pay a premium. So, but then even that kind of exchange can very later, as I learn to kind of go through that rationalization process, be something a bit comedic, because the way comedy works, I suppose, is that it's not just a question of I say something funny and people laugh. It's really about trying to capture or have a snapshot of some aspect of a human experience, whether it is a very real one or a surreal one that can arise out of a different experience. But it's really just, I suppose, trying to use laughter or comedy as a way of interpreting the human experience. And in the same way that we kind of make sense of our human experience, that can be done on like a one-to-one basis. That can be done if you're speaking to people on a larger scale. Sometimes that can be done doing your own introspection by yourself. I come up with a lot of ideas in the shower. It's very hard to have a pen and paper in there for obvious reasons. But I think each one of these methods can be effective. And the key in terms of finding inspiration is, I think, just leaving yourself open to it and not giving yourself the idea that I can't get ideas from this experience or I can't get ideas from this experience. I think something just as simple as people watching in any kind of creative endeavor can be very effective, because taking that time to analyze human behavior in various different environments can always be a great way of developing concepts to engage with people who are having that experience. So I think, yeah, there's lots of different ideas. I think in a way, this question kind of dovetails all of the questions that we've had previously, in terms of the fact that the creative process definitely involves self-belief and trusting of instincts, but also taking time to kind of check in with people as well and hone said instincts, and also use those exchanges as inspiration to continue to create. So I think the main thing is that it's always a dynamic process. Like even with some of my best ideas, I never just go, and take a week off. As I become a more experienced creative, I can always revisit previous ideas with newly educated eyes and improve on those as well. In the same way that I'm sure you guys may have heard something I've said today and be like, there's probably a better way he could have said that, or he could have been a lot more concise. But yeah, the conversation is always dynamic, so I hope I've not rambled too much. But if I have, where it's now your turn, so now to get your own back, I'd like to open the floor to ask some questions. And also, thank you very much, Trevor Robinson.
Thank you.
Been very helpful.
Hi, both. I just wondered, what's the idea that both of you are most proud of, and what was the process of building trust in that idea to get it to fruition, basically?
Should I just jump in?
Yeah,
funny enough, it's not the... Tango Slap was obviously a key thing to put Al and myself on the map, and like I said, kind of allowed me to do a lot of other things. But the idea that I'm most proud of is actually because I remember walking into a cinema to sit down, get my seat, and the audience were, our commercials on the screen, and the audience was laughing their heads off at the thing and at the commercial. And that commercial started off with, I'm trying to work out how I say this without it being too rude to the poor guy. That was years ago, back when you guys were little kids, we used to watch DVD videos, and one of the guys, we had an idea based on one of the guys who was a friend of ours who used to stay at home from work and pretend he was ill to his wife and stay at home and watch this particular videos and for his own amusement. And we took that concept for an Apple Tango ad where we had the guy do a very similar thing. His wife goes off to work, pretends he's ill, he puts this film on, and it's this tango can on. It's a long story. You'll see the commercial is a lot funnier than me describing it. But we managed to sell that idea to our creative directors, and which I didn't think was ever going to happen because we thought it was funny, but and they did as well. And then they managed to sell it to the clients, and the client bought it, and it ended up being on the screen, like I said, and I felt really proud of it, and it ended up winning awards and stuff. So for me, this stupid little observation, this silly little idea, this about what this guy used to get up to when his wife wasn't around, ended up being in a very popular public domain, as in a TV commercial. So that's probably the commercial that the idea that I'm most proud of in a weird way.
That's great. For myself, I think one of my more recent ideas was an idea on, still available on the BBC, by the way, as a show I did called Famous. And the idea was about me combining the concepts of thriving in a predominantly white world and being successful and having profile, and basically being black and famous, and what that kind of meant, that identity meant in the UK. But it was also more of a celebration of black British culture and British culture in general, and how there has been, you know, a undeniable link between those two things. And, you know, Trevor epitomizes that example in that, you know, you being tangoed is not only a reference to like a carbonated soft drink. If you see somebody with a spray tan that's been a bit too enthusiastic, people will say you've been tangoed. And that is how integral that campaign has been to just, you know, the British consciousness. And so Famous was an idea of celebrating those contributions, just so I wanted to demonstrate the idea that there doesn't have to be a distinct schism between what black British culture and British culture is. Both of those things are connected because they are one and the same. And that's kind of what the subtext of the show was, but it was also kind of a celebration of my predecessors and potential successors, just to kind of create a bridge between black British creatives and concepts and British culture in general, and showing how both of these things enrich one another. Including the fact that, like, you know, I think more recently, like 10 to 12% of all streamed music in the world is British music, and I think that's happened at the same time where black creatives have been able to shed the label of urban and become a part of the face of British music, and I believe have definitely carried the torch for how British music is perceived around the world for a very long time. Anyway, it was very fun, and I say this because Naomi Campbell retweeted it. And if you know Naomi Campbell, she doesn't suffer fools gladly, and if you get on her wrong side, you will get tangled in your face. So it's very endearing to see people, your peers, and people, like I said, like Trevor or Naomi, who have laid groundwork, particularly in creative industries, and been trailblazers, to recognize the work you're doing as well. So yeah, very proud moment there for myself. So thank you. You two will have to pick who goes first out of you two. I'm not getting involved. Hi.
Hi. Oh,
Hi.
okay. It's working. Cool. So this question, I'm going to ask you to kind of rewind back into the period where you were a bit more junior. And obviously in the beginning of the panel, you were talking about like, oh, like the industry was a sea of white faces, right? And obviously you've become successful, you carved your own area and you're sitting here. But was there a moment when you were more junior, when you kind of like flipped a switch and say like, you know, screw this industry, I'm just gonna do my own thing? Like, was there a tactic that you did, or was that a person, or kind of like a moment where you were like, okay, I'm an outsider, but I'm just gonna like do my own thing?
Is that to me? Or to...
Both of you.
Okay, cool. I think I kind of made my foray into the industry almost with that mentality already because, like I said, Trevor being an example, I had seen a lot of predecessors who had enjoyed success because they had gone on their own path and kind of did their own thing. So I think for myself, there was part of me that was always looking for a way to subvert the typical trajectory to success as it is, and then working with my management at the time to kind of make that happen. But yeah, I'll just tell you guys, I was told by one agent, like I said, that they already had a black actor, they didn't need two. Now, I could have become very stroppy about this, but I guess for me, I was almost like, I cannot wait to make you eat your words. I was saying that. And there's also, I guess, I had the benefit of being able to see how my work was being received in real time. So, and this is what I'm saying with like instincts, is that if you are honest with yourself and what you're doing, you'll know if what you're doing is working. And I guess with the benefit of comedy, I could get the reaction from audiences to see if what I was doing was working as well. So I guess it just came down to the fact that I was able to get immediate feedback on how well I was progressing, even though it didn't involve plaudits or necessarily critical acclaim initially. I was kind of like, well, the phone's still ringing, you're still getting gigs, and you're still enjoying what you're doing. And I think that's the most important part of the process. So to answer the question, the short answer to the question is, yeah, there's probably a few times when I was like, I'm gonna do my own thing and I don't care. But that is a notion that I've revisited a number of times in my career. So in the time I've been in comedy, like 12, 13 years, there's probably been a point maybe every 2 or 3 years where I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. And I think that's a very important aspect to carry with you, because you'll always, as the magnitude of your achievements increase, so will the size of the adversity and obstacles you encounter as well. And so always being able to center yourself and return back to that point where like, I trust in my instincts, I'll do it my own way, is always very useful. And I think it's also mainly useful as well because once you're able to understand and define your own process, and you know, you'll also know what you want to ask for, and that will also help you in leverage when you are going to be involved in more of a collaborative process or trying to find a larger stakeholder to maybe sell an idea to or have an idea commissioned, is that you will be able to name your own terms. And sometimes when you hear people speak about it, people will call other creators and people quite diva-ish or very insistent. I imagine as women, or identifying as women, a lot of the time, that's something you encounter a lot more when you're very assertive about what you want. But I think I can tell you now from the other side that it's like, you can definitely work with people and hold on to your ideas without being confrontational. And I think it's very useful because when you realize your idea and it is a success, that's always very rewarding. And if you tend to acquiesce to what other people want, no one's going to look at something like, if I create an idea and it doesn't come off, they're not going to go, well, one of those producers weren't doing their job properly because it's my name that's attached to it. So I think it's a good idea, it's a good mentality to have, as long as you understand that, yeah, I definitely a few times was like, yeah, I'll just do it my own way. But there'll be a few times where you'll be like, I'm gonna do it my own way. So.
I guess the key bit, because like I said before, it was quite intimidating to be in the advertising industry. It was so slick and grown up, and obviously I've spent a lot of time trying to get into advertising. It took Al and I about 2 years really to get into advertising, and have get a seat at the table. But I think the key change for me was when I realized that, yes, these guys are very bright, very talented people that I'm now sat in a room with. But I realized none of them was from my background. None of them was really connected to the outside world. I felt closer to the outside world. I felt like I definitely do ideas to impress my family, impress my peers, impress my friends, not my peers so much as the industry. So what I always looked at is I've got a card that a lot of them didn't have, which was a closer connection to the outside world and a means to communicate to them, because I just felt they didn't speak the language. In nowadays terms, I feel there's a real distance with me. I'm middle class, black guy now, and been in the industry for a long time. So I love working with the young, talented kids that are out there, because they have got that connection to the outside world that I'm kind of a little step back from. So that's the key thing for me, is to understand and respect my uniqueness and being proud to use that and within the industry.
You still have a question?
Thank you. It's kind of for both as well. I was just reflecting, it's a bit obvious maybe, but about the relationship with advertising and humor and bravery, especially because in the years, like advertising was traditionally very linked to sense of humor, comedy, and creative teams were even encouraged to go to stand-up comedy courses. And then for years we saw the kind of rise of the very emotional, purpose-led ad. And recently I think we see a bit of a comeback, especially after Cannes, of the fun ad. But I was wondering especially what Trevor thinks about this comeback of the fun in advertising, and if you see a bit different, like how it's going to feel like, is it going just to be a comeback, or is it going to be require much more bravery than it did before?
I didn't hear that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It was very long to repeat.
Because you're saying about
So yeah, basically
comedy coming back into advertising and stuff. And
but I feel it requires a bit more bravery than it did 20 years ago in a way, especially after years of the very emotional, a moving ad. So I was wondering, what do you both think about that?
Noticing trends of obviously before with tango and being comedic, and then there may be a shift of a bit more emotional, humanitarian advertising. Are you seeing advertising moving back into more of the comical space? And
I never understand that in terms of I guess what actually, I remember when Guinness Surfer ad came out, and that felt like I was in so much awe of that idea. And then there were a few campaigns that obviously reflected that kind of big epic type advertising. But I don't quite understand it, because I don't know when you stop wanting to enjoy something that's epic or stop enjoying something that's funny. At the end of the day, especially when things are depressing as what we've been all gone through with pandemics and Brexits and wars, I think that is a time for comedy for me. That is a time that I want to be entertained and not be talked to and not be made to feel guilty about, what I'm doing with my life and what I'm doing to the earth. So I don't know, when it comes to themes, I just think we all get excited and influenced by exciting things, and then it starts spilling out on you. Because like I said before, I think as a creative, you're like a sponge anyway to the world. So whatever is exciting you and influences you starts coming out in the work. But I do tend to have, no one wants to have a stock style. You want to be all loosey-goosey, that no one really knows what's he going to come up with next. But I do tend to get drawn towards humorous things, and I think I find that really stimulating for me.
I'm going to talk from the comedic perspective. I think that normally advertising, like with most endeavors, because I guess advertising, in terms of how it appears, is a subgenre of art in terms of how it appears in this part of the world. And I think it's always going to be reflective of the zeitgeist at the time. So when you were seeing maybe more epic and a kind of bigger campaigns, that would be reflective at a time where maybe more was invested in films of a particularly large scale. So in the same way that, as Trevor said, like, if people have spent a lot of time in isolation and need for their spirits to be lifted, then you'd hopefully think that the creative industry would kind of reflect that in those campaigns and stuff as well. So, I mean, myself personally, I think that comedy is an essential part of advertising, but I think it's much more it's the idea of how a company can execute a campaign based on how it's perceived. So I think there are some brands, for example, who don't want to take themselves too seriously or are aware of their perception. So for example, like Frey Bentos, they make like pies that come in a tin. So for them to have like an epic campaign when they present themselves in the same way that Marks and Spencer's would, probably wouldn't make any sense. And maybe more of a comedic way of not taking themselves too seriously can be a very effective way of communicating that brand's identity. So I think it's good to see like comedic trends. And I think it's also because comedy is very effectively and very often used as an icebreaker. And if you're trying to introduce a new idea or a new way of perceiving a brand or a product, then it can also be a very effective way of doing that. So that's probably going to be an ongoing trend. I think that, as Trevor said, there's probably a lot more to consider now when executing comedy. You can't flippantly reduce marginalized or historically oppressed groups, and you shouldn't anyway. So you have to take that into account. But at the same time, you don't want to patronize people or be too contrived in how you're trying to market towards people, which is obviously a discussion in advertising now. But at the same time, there is an element of corporate responsibility or corporate ethics that people look for, whether it's the sustainability of your practices or how conscientious you are about the products or raw materials you use to make a product as well, are all things that have to be part of the conversation. And sometimes, again, comedy can be in a very effective way of communicating those ideas. So I think that hopefully that's something that does continue and something that comedians can be involved in, because obviously there have been some real significant advertising campaigns that have involved comedians, like with Peter Kay doing like bit adverts and that becoming a part of like British vernacular. And yeah, hopefully that will continue. Did you have a quick question? I think we haven't got much time, so apologies for that. However, if anyone does have any further questions or want to give any feedback and don't want to maybe do this in the crowd, please do get in touch online with myself and Trevor, and we'll be happy to kind of fill you in on those as well. Just leaves for us to say thank you very much for listening. I want to start by thanking Trevor Robinson, OBE, so a round of applause, Trevor.
Thank you.
When I'm not incoherently rambling and trying to hold together a discussion, guys, you can find more of my content online. If anyone is interested in comedy and is going to the Fringe this year, I'll be performing from the 14th to the 27th of August, so you can find me on there. But in the meantime, yeah, any further questions or any more discussions on all things creative, that's my name. Feel free to get in touch and we can discuss it then. But thank you very much, Trevor, for enduring me, and thank you everyone else for listening. Bye, everyone.